Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Ethan Riley. I am a senior Division I pole vaulter at Florida International University, and I am studying sport and exercise science. And the topic of today's video is going to be the hamstrings. And first, I want to start with the biology of the hamstring. So we have three hamstring muscles, the first of which being the biceps femoris. So that is going to be the most lateral, or the furthest outside of the back of your leg. And then you have the semitendinosus, which is medial, so it lies right in the middle of the back of your leg. And then the semimembranosus, which is the most medial, so it's going to be a little bit further on the inside than the tendinosus. But there's one extra muscle that we group in with the hamstrings, and that's called the adductor magnus. And we group this in just because there is a shared origin with the hamstrings on the pelvis. And it also works to extend the hips. So it does the same sort of movements as, or it produces the same movements as the hamstrings. And then my history with hamstrings, it's a long one. I have had a total of 12 hamstring strains, I believe, up to this point. The first one was at the very end of my senior year of high school, and then throughout my collegiate career, it's extended every single year, sometimes several times a year. So I have a pretty extensive history with hamstring injuries, especially with the rehab process, and as well as the strengthening process, which is super, super important. And hamstring injuries suck. A grade 1 strain can take up to 3 weeks to heal, and then a more severe grade 3 strain, which would be a tear, can take up to 6 months or even longer to rehab. So that's an entire season, an entire training season, literally half a year. And the rehab process sucks. It hurts a lot and it's no fun. So I do not wish it on my worst enemy. Hamstring injuries are terrible. And so today I'm going to give you guys some exercises, some tips on how we can build resilience to injury in our hamstrings specifically. So first of which, the causes of injury. The biggest one that we see in athletics is going to be the sudden acceleration, like sprinting or jumping, and fatigue plays a huge part with these. As your body fatigues, you cannot focus as much on technique, which is obviously hugely important, especially in sprinting, jumping, any athletic movement. So whenever you're fatigued, you cannot place as much emphasis on technique. When your technique gets shaky, that's when injuries happen. The second of which being deceleration or change of direction. Now, deceleration is absolutely paramount. The eccentric contraction, especially in sprinting, as our knee extends, that eccentric contraction of the hamstring is where the most injuries happen. So strengthening that eccentric is going to be huge. And then we have muscular imbalances like weak or tight hip flexors, quads, or glutes. Anything that supports the body, especially with sprinting, is going to be hugely important that everything is balanced as it should be, just to prevent injury and make sure that nothing is working too hard, especially the hamstrings, because whenever something works too hard, it's when you tend to get injured. And then finally, an improper warm-up or activation of those muscles. So when we're doing any athletic movement or practice or game or anything, we want to make sure that our hamstrings are properly warmed up and they're ready to take the forces of sprinting or athletic movements. Next, ways to build resilience. So the biggest thing is going to be full range of motion training. So the hamstrings are extremely vulnerable whenever your knees are fully extended. So things like Nordic curls, band assisted Nordic curls, razor curls, or a hybrid razor and Nordic curl are going to be absolutely paramount. You get full range of motion of the hamstrings with knee extension and the hips being extended. So this is really good at putting those hamstrings in that most vulnerable position. But we want to make sure that we have adequate periodization. So you start off maybe with a band-assisted Nordic, and then once you get strong enough, you move into no band, but a little bit less full range of motion. So you drop down until you can't hold it anymore. You push up off the ground, and then you perform the concentric contraction of the hamstrings to get all the way up. And then as you get really, really strong, you move into the full Nordics, which is no assistance whatsoever. You extend all the way down, and then you pull all the way back up, which takes an enormous amount of strength. So it's really important that you don't just jump right into something like that and expect to be able to do it. I can't even do it myself, trying as hard as I can to get up to that point, but those are for elite athletes, which I want you to be elite. So we're gonna work our way up to that, and we're all gonna be elite together, and it's gonna be bliss. And then another thing, good mornings or RDLs. These are super important at putting tension on the hamstrings in the lengthened position, which is obviously super important. As you're sprinting, you extend the knee, your hamstrings are lengthened, and you need to be able to produce force in that position. And we can do these with a split stance. We can do them single leg, ipsilateral or contralateral loading. So loading on the same side versus the opposite side. There's some different balance aspects that come into play there. And you can do these with barbells, really any way you like, as long as you're getting some load. It's really important. And then now I'm going to show you guys some videos of those exercises I just talked about. So the band assisted Nordics, the razor curl, that hybrid, and then some Nordic curls as well. So here are the Nordic hamstring curls unassisted. Like I said earlier, I'm not quite strong enough to lower myself all the way down. So it's not a full unassisted. I'm still pushing off the ground here, but for the setup, we want our ankles to be dorsiflexed, so you can see that my toes are on the ground rather than the tops of my feet. We want our knees to be about hip width apart, and then we want to try our best to keep our hips in a neutral position rather than extending or flexing the hips. This is just going to make sure that is as stable as possible, so that we can really engage those hamstrings and produce as much force as possible. Here you can see the band-assisted Nordic curl. So all the same setup, all the same cues, but having the band to assist, especially in the eccentric contraction, is going to help us put a ton of force through our hamstrings through a full range of motion. You can see here that I start to extend my elbows a little bit. This just adds a little bit more tension to the band to help get out of that bottom position and start the concentric contraction. Here we have the band-assisted razor curl, again, because I am not strong enough to do them without it. And then for the starting position, it's going to basically look like the bottom position of an RDL. So our hips are going to be flexed and our spine is going to be parallel to the ground. And then from there, you extend the hips and the knees until you are flat on the ground. And we would like to see a contraction of the glutes while you're flat on the ground, just to make sure that we are, again, engaging all of our hamstrings to start that concentric contraction. I'm going to play this video with the audio on just because I want you guys to hear how difficult this is and how much external motivation it takes to even perform this with the band.
There, Jimmy. Thank you. It'd be really cool if she squeezed those glutes, though. Good. Squeeze those glutes. Get them out there. Back up. Come on.
Get up. Hey.
And finally, we have here the hybrid between the razor curl and the Nordic curl. So it's the same start for the razor curl, and then once you get to full extension of the hips and knees, it's going to turn into a Nordic curl. So you are not going to return back to the starting position of just the razor curl. Instead, you're going to perform the concentric contraction of the Nordic curl. And now that we saw those videos, I want to talk about how we can add these into our training. And so the first of which being activation. So this is going to be before you practice, before your games, before you lift, whatever you're doing. We want to make sure that the hamstrings are nice and warmed up, prepared to absorb especially, and then also put out force so that we can improve our performance. So the first of which with activation, I love the hamstring curl, especially banded or with a medicine ball. You want to start out definitely at least 2 sets of 10 reps, maybe 3 sets, and then work our way up. If we can get into the 20 range, the 25 range for a couple, maybe 3 sets, that's going to be huge. That means your hamstrings are really strong, and they're also, they have high endurance, which is super important, especially in sports, because you're not just playing a sport for however long it takes you to do a set, you're going to be playing it for a long time. And then next is heavy strength training through full range of motion. and then power training through shortened range of motion. So similar to with the Nordics and all that, we want to make sure that we are loading those as much as we can. Obviously, again, with periodization over time, we want to up the weight so that we are developing the strength. And then the power training obviously is super important, especially with the eccentric contractions, especially in the weight room. So with things like split jerks, where you get a lot of eccentric force on the proximal hamstrings with your front foot whenever you are braking there, and then any other lift where your hamstrings have to absorb a lot of force, it's going to be really important, especially with eccentric power. And then finally, stretching. So we're going to talk about frequency and intensity here. So should be stretching your hamstrings every single day, if possible. I know it's really, really hard. It's hard to fit them in. It's hard to even remember sometimes, but if we can stretch our hamstrings at least 15 minutes every single day, up to 30 minutes is really incredible. And then you shouldn't feel comfortable. Stretching your hamstrings, or stretching any muscle in general, is not something that feels comfortable. If you're comfortable, you're not getting the stretch that you need. And so whenever we're doing any stretching, we want to make sure that we're pushing ourselves to where it's uncomfortable, but not super painful where we're going to get injured, because that would suck. And it's very counterintuitive. So yeah, as long as you are stretching to a point where it's uncomfortable, but not painful, you are going to get the adaptations that you want with flexibility, and flexibility is obviously super important with athletics. With all that being said, I appreciate you guys' time watching this video. I hope you maybe learned something today, something that helps you. I know it's helped me tremendously. Knock on wood, have not had any injuries this season, this training season, so hoping to extend that health throughout the season and for the rest of my life. But you know, things happen, so hopefully you guys can take away some good from this video, implement some of these things, and we can all get better together. So again, thank you for watching the video. Really appreciate it, and I will see you guys in the next one.